Hello and welcome to the Purpose Reimagined program. I'm Jim Spellman. Today we're going to be talking about something really important as a widowed person in grief and healing, and that is personal relationship boundaries. In the best of times, boundaries can be tumultuous, hard, and a difficult part of our lives. And today we're going to learn a new way, an essential way to look at boundaries with more ease, with more flow, and with more creativity. So welcome to Creating Boundaries That Work for a Hopeful Future. I am honored that you're here. You're a widowed person, as I am, and I know what it takes. It takes courage. It takes bravery. And no matter where you are, 6 days, 6 months, 6 years, or 16 years out, I honor your bravery and your commitment to yourself to heal. You could be anywhere right now, but you're listening to me in the exact right space, in the exact right time. And that takes something. You could be anywhere else, but you're here leaning into healing, questioning, wondering, is there more? Can I create healing amongst all of this pain? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. So welcome. Let's start by easing our way into how can we create boundaries even in grief, right? I'll talk about what are boundaries and how to create boundaries in a new way, but what are three pillars that we can use, 3 beliefs that we can center on that will help us today in our journey, in our grief journey, in creating boundaries for a hopeful future. First of all, however you're feeling, and no matter what intensity you're feeling, it is perfect. And I know you've heard that before, but really today, no matter how sad you are, how much in pain, how confused, maybe numb, maybe you're even a little hopeful, whatever it is and to what intensity is absolutely perfect. You can stop the video, and this is all about resonation. So whatever resonates today, take it in. Whatever doesn't, leave it. You don't need, and I believe, you don't need to add something more to your plate. You got enough going on. I know. And so wherever you're at is perfect. And you don't have to get any of this right? There's nothing to learn today. It's all about absorbing what works for you and leaving the rest. And I truly believe that we're all doing, especially as widowed people in grief and healing, doing the very best that we can, right? With what we've been through and where we are and everything that's happening in our lives. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to get into this new way of creating boundaries, even as a widowed person, even in deep grief. And let me start by saying that when we're widowed and our life is blown apart, as it has for me, as it has for you, there are so many things that affect our boundary systems. Our emotional resilience is lowered. We may have feelings that lead us to muddied and brittle boundaries. We may experience boundary whiplash out of sheer emotion immersion. And due to depletion and widow fog, the elasticity of our relationship boundaries may not exist, and we may not create boundaries that work out of fear for losing even more. Like if we fear of creating a boundary that doesn't work and people disappearing from our lives. So there's a lot going on, but there is hope, and that's why we're here today, to learn a new way. So here's a new perspective on creating boundaries that work for you, creating boundaries for a hopeful future, right? Instead of looking at boundaries as tedious, as frightening, as more on your plate, we can look at them even in our deep grief, and we deserve to look at them in our grief differently now because of our deep pain, because of our life blowing apart. It's part of the process of our grief is allowing new ways and new possibilities. I know that may not seem possible at certain times, but I think that's essential to know and to lean into. It's like, I've been through enough, right? My life is blown apart. That I don't want to take, I can't take any more pain. It's my time to heal in a way that works for me. So there's 4 new pillars to look at and to absorb and to have resonate for you around boundaries. Instead of fixing and boundaries as a way of going away from something, let's look at it through a new lens of being courageous. Look, you're full of courage just by being here today and listening to me and being on this weekend and being in Purpose Reimagined and in hearing all of these speakers and soaking in. Like, look, you could be anywhere else and you're here. That's courageous. The second pillar is self-care, right? I believe boundaries and self-care are interlinked. They are enmeshed with each other. You can't have one without the other. And I'm not just talking about self-care like eating right and sleeping, which are all essential self-care items. I'm talking about creating relationships, creating a world that works for you in your grief so that you can heal, so that you can move through your journey in a way that works for you. The third pillar is creativity. I mean, how often have we looked at boundaries through the lens of creativity? Probably never. We're not taught to. In fact, we're taught that boundaries are hard, and we often go towards relationships, and I'll talk about this in a minute, that are dramatic and difficult for us. It's time to look at boundaries through the creative lens rather than trying to fix something or get something right. The fourth pillar is being non-judgmental, right? We have all these voices that we carried with us even from before our partner or spouses died. And those negative voices still, we all have them. The chatter of negative voices. And it's time for us to create a different way of being with ourselves so that we can be non-judgmental about ourselves, right? So that we can create a new language for ourselves. It's our time. We deserve this. I really believe that in our grief, I really hope this resonates, and if it doesn't, that's fine. But it's our time in being widowed and grieving and healing to be non-judgmental, to be easier with ourselves, to be more kind to ourselves. There are a lot of definition of boundaries, and I'm going to give you a very simple one today to carry with you, because we don't need a long, scientific, complicated definition of boundaries, especially in our widowed life right now. What are boundaries? What we do and say to create our safe place in the world. And I'll say that again. What we do and say to create our safe place in the world. That's it. That's what boundaries are. It's as simple as that. You may feel really, really lost, and you may feel in complete pain. And I know that healing is possible right here, right now, just by knowing that boundaries are that simple. Easy? I'm not saying it's easy, but how can I create a safe place for myself in this world to build back my trust, to build back some joy, to build back some ease in my life? This is the new perspective that I'm talking about. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of creating boundaries, right? And how do we know when a boundary isn't working, right? We often are unable to say no to a person that we have a boundary challenge with. We may say yes when we actually mean no. We may feel particularly fatigued around a person. We may feel stressed around people that we don't have boundaries that work as well as we'd like to. We may even feel ill or sick or physically sick. We may avoid situations. It's all normal. This is all normal in the best of times. And now we're grieving, right? Now we're immersed in this world that we could have never imagined happening. And of course, we're going to have boundary challenges with all of those indications. And how do we know that a relationship boundary is working for us, right? We do have friends, we do have family, we do have new people that have come into our lives, and we know our boundary systems are working when it's easy to say no when we mean no. We want to be around that person. We feel peaceful around the people where our boundaries are working. We feel honored and respected. We feel loving and connected. And right now in grief and being widowed, that's what we want to go towards, is those relationships where the boundaries are working. And if we have essential relationships, and we'll talk about this in a second, that aren't working as well as we'd like them to, then we can work to create new boundaries, which I will talk about in a few minutes. Within personal relationships, there are 3 general types of relationships. They exist before our spouse or partner died, and now it's even more noticeable and more pronounced because our life is blown apart and we're widowed, right? The first type of relationship is a relationship that gives me energy. These are the relationships that are easy, they're fun, they may be social, they may be with a best friend, you feel honored and respected, right? Then there are the neutral relationships in our lives that make up the biggest part of our pie, like workplace relationships and social relationships. They neither take energy or give you energy. They're just neutral. They're easy to come in and out of. They just exist, and it's the biggest part of our relationship pie. The third type of relationships are the relationships that take energy, right? And when we're in our widowhood and in our grief, those are the relationships that zap us, that we don't want to be around, that are very difficult for us. And these are the relationships and boundaries to take a look at as we move through this, so that you can more easily create boundaries within those relationships that take energy. And how is it possible to create boundaries? And we'll get into the specifics of how in a minute, when we're feeling numb, depleted, and emotionally immersed. How is it even possible? And I'm saying it's possible because we reach in to our inner grief rebel. And I consider myself a grief rebel coach because I believe that widowed people are grief rebels. It takes feistiness, it takes boldness, it takes a certain healthy rebelliousness to create the life that you want out of being blown apart, right? And it's our time. You deserve this. And so it's about declaration. I deserve to feel safe. It's about a knowing, like an internal knowing that you can connect to. I deserve hopeful boundaries. And then you can say to yourself, this is my time. It's simple. This is my time because of everything that I've been through. Yell, I've got this. It doesn't have to be out loud. It could be within yourself. I've got this. This is my time. It takes some boldness, some feistiness, right? But there's also an ease that I'll explain and a creativity in creating boundaries that work for you even in our deep grief. There's 2 questions to ask ourselves. What is my life like when my relationship boundaries are not working like I like them to? And what is my life like? What are my relationships like when my relationship boundaries are working to their optimum, working like I want them to? Okay, so there's 2 places to look at, right? One is, what is my life like? What are my relationships like when my boundaries are not working? Okay, we can name the feelings. I feel overwhelmed, threatened, scared, tired, depleted, numb, in conflict, all of these things. When our relationships aren't working, our boundaries aren't working, we feel pressed upon and stressed. Now, the opposite is true for when our relationships are working and our relationship boundaries for a hopeful future are working. We feel what? You can list them out. I would encourage you to download my workbook and so that you can really work on this and see when they're working. I feel peaceful. I feel at ease. I feel respected. I feel trust. I feel hopeful, right? Two distinct ways of being around relationships and boundaries. And of course, as a widowed person and our life being blown apart, we want to move towards those relationships where the boundaries are working and create boundaries that are working in the relationships that those that are stressful for us. And who do we have boundaries with? Everybody. Immediate family, extended family, social, intimate relationships, work relationships. Every person that we relate with, we have an invisible neural, I say a network because boundaries are this kind of invisible fabric that hold us together and create how we act and how we act and how we are around people. And in what areas of life do we have boundaries and boundary challenges? Every area. Finances, time, space, sexual intimacy, mental, emotional resources. We also have internal boundary challenges. Our internal boundaries about ourselves are a big part of boundaries also. So boundaries are this invisible network that are the fabric of how we move and how we are in the world in all areas of our life and with all people. And without a new way of creating hopeful boundaries for a hopeful future, the old way is that we avoid boundaries, and everybody does, before grief. And now that we're a widowed person, these four, I call them the 4 C's: confrontation, conflict, confusion, and catastrophe. We're all avoiding boundary challenges because of those 4 C's. I'm here to say that when we approach boundaries from this new lens of creativity and non-judgment and self-care, that the 4 C's dissipate. Confrontation, conflict, confusion, and catastrophe don't exist when we create boundaries from this new way for a hopeful future. What are the 4 pillars of creating hopeful boundaries? The first one is courage. You're here. Whether you are aware of it or not, you are courageous. You are very courageous. You are the elite. Spending your time looking for ways to help, digging in, questioning, uncovering things about yourself, you're already courageous. The second pillar of creating hopeful boundaries is self-care, right? Self-care and boundaries are completely intertwined. I can't say this enough. And I'm talking, yes, self-care about sleeping, eating right, getting massages, all of that. But the essential active self-care is being in life in a way that works for you so that you can grieve and heal in a way that works for you. This is your time. I'm going to say it again. You deserve it because of the pain that you're in, because of all that you've been through. You deserve to be immersed in self-care. Okay, so that's the second pillar. The third pillar, third foundation of creating hopeful boundaries, rather than boundaries, rigid boundaries, the old way of fixing things and resolution and conflict, is creativity, right? We get to be creative. We get to choose to create what works for us. And I know this seems impossible or feels impossible, especially in grief and deep grief, but look, creating boundaries in this way is a creative process. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. There just is the way that works for you. And I just really want to impart this to you that creativity is just of the essence here. How can we look in a way that works for us? How can we just let the universe or God or love flow within our boundaries? What if our boundaries are just happening for us and not to us? What if creating boundaries comes from an act of creation rather than tightness or control or fixing? Okay? The fourth pillar of this new way of looking at boundaries is non-judgment, right? How can we give ourselves permission now in our grief, in our life being unimaginable, to be gentle with ourselves, to be kind with ourselves? I'm talking about that first, and yes, being non-judgmental about others, but it's our time. Our those harsh words towards ourselves, they don't work anymore. They don't serve us. They don't create boundaries that work for us. Those harsh words don't create safety and trust. It's time for us to move towards non-judgment of ourselves. And that is the fourth pillar of creating hopeful boundaries. I'm going to explain now that at the core of creating hopeful boundaries for a hopeful future are three beliefs, right? Three core beliefs. These are simple, not easy, but simple. So let's see what resonates with you. First one is, I'm responsible for me only. When I'm creating boundaries from a place of creativity and non-judgment, of self-care and courage, I'm responsible for me only. I'm not responsible for the other person. I own all of my reactions and my emotions. Nobody can control my emotions or reactions. I own all of them. So one is, I'm responsible for me only. Two is, I own all my reactions and emotions. The third one is, I'm creating freedom in me. I'm not trying to change them, right? That's a big one. I'm creating freedom for me. I'm not trying to change the outer world. A lot of this is like, we can't fix what's out there. We're working so much on ourselves. We're on this healing journey. It's impossible to take the time, to spend the energy on trying to fix things. Leave that for when you have fuel in your tanks, if that's what you want to do. But right now, creating freedom for you and not changing them is essential. Now, what's of the essence too in creating hopeful boundaries for a hopeful future is that, one, we deserve this. I'm going to say it again and again. And two, that it's time for us to say, I am ready for peace in my life. I have been through so much. I'm ready to create peace. I'm ready. I'm in a space of, I don't need any more pain in my relationships. So I'm going to lean into self-care, into creativity, non-judgment, so that I can create a space for me to be in my grief, in my healing that works for me. You can create boundaries in deep grief. You can create safety in deep grief. Okay, I'll explain this in a couple minutes, but just know that it's possible. Now, I know this is a crash course, right? We're doing like a month's worth of boundary creating in a 20-minute presentation. So I'm going to go through how to create hopeful boundaries right now. And just absorb what you can. I encourage you to, download the workbook. There's a lot in there. But first, I'm just going to go through how to create hopeful boundaries. One, choose a relationship that's not working as well as you'd like it to. Any will do. You can pause this to think about this. Any relationship. Don't choose the hardest one and the most difficult, emotionally challenging one right now. Pick one that's easy. So the second step, again, not to memorize, but the second phase of creating a boundary in this new way of creating hopeful boundaries for a hopeful future is to describe your boundary. And it doesn't have to be hard. This isn't something that you have to concentrate on for a long time. But being specific about the boundary that we'd like to create is helpful, right? And you want to come from a space of creativity and keeping it simple. And I'm going to read through a couple of examples for you. One is about work. I will let my supervisor know that I will work on Tuesday and Thursday and not Wednesday. That's a work boundary. I will not spend more than 2 hours at the family gathering this weekend. Because we all, as a widowed person, have these social boundaries, especially with family when we're fatigued and overwhelmed and don't want to spend as much time with certain people. So it's coming from a place of creativity, from self-care, right? From being a little courageous with a little oomph and feistiness. Like, no, I'm going to stick to this. I'm not going to spend X amount of time with these people. I'm only going to spend the time that works for me. So being specific with the person and with the boundary is just helpful. I will only answer texts and phone calls that I want to. That's a big one. Instead of feeling burdened, especially around important anniversary dates in our first few years, especially, is like, I don't want to return all the texts. I don't want to talk to these people. You get to say what works for you. The third step or phase, not to memorize, but like the third area, is come from a space of caring for you. This isn't about fixing the other person. This isn't about changing them. This is about you taking care of you so that you can heal in the way that works for you. You get to say, I don't have the energy right now. You get to say, that doesn't work for me and this does. You get to say no when you mean no. I'm going to give you permission for that. And hopefully watching this and learning and leaning into your healing, that you can give yourself that permission too. There are several mantras that I use that I'm going to share with you now that really help me create relationship boundaries that really work for me, that give me hope. One is, there's nowhere to get and nothing to fix. When we approach boundaries and relationships from there's nothing wrong with them and what they're doing, nothing wrong with me and what I'm doing, then there's nothing to fix. There's nothing to get right. This is super, super, super important, because when we are trying to fix, there's this assumption, this underlying belief that there's something wrong, right? Well, what if we came from a place that there's nothing wrong and nothing to fix in any of our relationships or any of our boundaries? They're just not working as well as we'd like them to. They're not working for us. Simply being non-judgmental. There's nothing to fix. There's nowhere to get. The second one, which is huge, is I don't owe anybody an explanation. What about that? What if you went through your life now as a widowed person and didn't have to explain yourself? What would that be like? I use this all of the time. When we explain, we are trying to give reasons for why we are right? If we don't have to explain, there's no reason. It just is. It's what works for us and what doesn't work for us. The next mantra is, boundaries are my widow superpower. I'm going to say that again. Boundaries are my widow superpower. When I create boundaries that work for me, I create a space for hope. I create a space for creation. I create a space just to be. I create a space to feel. I create a space to heal, right? You deserve this. Boundaries are your widow superpower in healing. Next one is, I'm whole as I am and as I am not. That means, and the last one is, I'm not broken. I am whole as I am and as I am not. That's one. And the last one is, I am not broken. I'm whole, even my grief, even though I feel blown apart into a million pieces. It's kind of like this ethereal puzzle, right? You're blown apart and there's a million pieces of you all over the place, but are those individual pieces broken? No. You're choosing those pieces that work for you, right? Like a puzzle, and they're going to fit back together. but you are not broken. The fourth area, the fourth step, again, allowing ourselves just to absorb, is to create hopeful boundaries. You just need some simple conversation starters, and I'm going to read you a few. I say conversation starters because we often, in our thinking, are trying to get the words right. We're trying to get the words correct in our head so that we can have a conversation that works. That's not the way that it actually works for this new way of creating hopeful boundaries. There's no getting it right. So you start the conversation and let it flow from a place of self-care, of creativity, of courage, and non-judgmentalness towards yourself and towards the other person, but mostly towards yourself. And it's like, here are some examples. Somebody asks you something, and inside you can feel the boundary that you want, right? And you know that's not going to work for you. And sometimes the old way would be like, it might be a lie, it might be a cover up or an explanation, just simply saying that doesn't work for me. Okay, the next one is, this isn't about you. I'm just so tired or exasperated or overwhelmed. I really want to take space for myself, or I want to take time for myself. And that is no explanation. It's not really about you. It's about what I want right now. That's another one. Another conversation starter and ender is no. Do you know that as a widowed person, you get to say no anytime? I give you permission, right? And I hope that you can give yourself permission to say no at any time. You can change your no to yes. You can change your yes to no, but you get to, especially now in your grief, in your widowed life that's been blown apart, you get to say simply no. The fifth area or phase or step that you, in this new way of creating hopeful boundaries for a hopeful future, is, as being a widowed person, is practice. Practice creating hopeful boundaries. Again, start with the simple ones. Maybe it's a person at work. Maybe it's a friend that's asking you to do something and you want to say no. Start simply, but just practice. Now, practice, the old way of looking at practice is practice makes perfect. There's no perfect, I'm telling you right now. There is no perfect anymore. We're not trying to get this perfect. It's just naming the boundary, describing the boundary, and having a sense of what you would like to work better, and then starting the conversation coming from a place of self-care, self-love, and non-judgmentalness, and then practice, right? I know this seems really difficult, okay? You, believe it or not, the boundaries that you are creating in your life right now, you're creating them. Whether we know that or not, we are creating boundaries constantly. And when we do it unconsciously in the old way, right, they just seem to kind of come up. Now, you got this new way from these 4 pillars, right? And you get to create them consciously. You get to practice. And practice doesn't mean perfect, right? It's just asking yourself, what works for me? How can I take care of myself in my grief? And when you practice, you may stumble over words. You may get it all wrong. You may think that you're not doing it right, but I'm telling you, coming from a place of self-care, of creativity, of non-judgment and courage, it's impossible to get it wrong. There is no wrong. There is no perfect. So hopefully that relieves the stress of boundary creating for you. So I'm going to wind up here by saying simply, right, there's all these things that we talked about and phases and steps, and it's just absorbing what works for you, whatever resonates with you. But here it is, how to create boundaries for a hopeful future. Go practice. Just start. Get it wrong. Communicate imperfectly. Say it all wrong. Because when you're coming from that place of what works for me, it will always create more of what works for you. So I just want to say thank you. I'm honored that you're here. I honor your courage for being here. I'm always available. I'm going to have my email on here. I return all emails. I'd love to hear how your new way of creating hopeful boundaries is going, or if you have any questions or concerns, I would love to be there for you. Thank you.